Hello guys, so in this video session I am going to show what is the difference between the manual and the scheduled trigger and why we need the triggers in the CI/CD pipelines in the Azure DevOps and what is the importance so that you can understand through this video, and I am going to show through the visual effects. You can understand the triggers in this video. So suppose there is one person who is the employee of a company. His name is the John, and John is in the DevOps team. He just joined the company and he is in the DevOps team. John has the knowledge about the Azure DevOps, and for that he want to set up the Azure DevOps CI/CD pipeline on the system. So John will go to the Azure DevOps and he set up the Azure DevOps on this CI/CD system. Once the Azure DevOps is configured on the systems, he has created the Azure DevOps account. Now he is able to create the CI/CD pipelines on this system. Now John will go to the system. He will create a continuous integration pipeline on the system once the Azure DevOps account is set up, and then he is going to click on the start to trigger the build. So once he click on the start button to trigger the build, what will happen? The CI build is triggered. So in that scenario, the John presence is necessary to start the CI build. This process we called as the manual trigger. Now John back to his work, and after the end of the day, he went to home. Suddenly, the manager remembered that the build got failed and he want to trigger it again. Then he called to the John. Okay, but John was not available. John was not available. He will come to the next day in the office so that he can trigger the build again. Next day when John come and he again go to the system and again he trigger the build. And he will click on the start button and the CI build is triggered. And John again went to his desk. Now John is thinking like, if I am not there in front of the system, so then the manager having some problems. He cannot trigger the build. So we need one person should be available in front of the system so that he can click on the run button to trigger the CI build. So he was thinking the solution for that. So he got one solution, and this solution he got for the schedule trigger in the CI/CD pipelines. So he thought, I will schedule at the 9 p.m. IST Indian Standard Time or any GMT time or UST time. So he will trigger. So he choose the time. Then he will go to the system and there he will set up the CI pipeline with this time deadline. And he will leave the CI pipeline as it is. Now at this time the trigger is built automatically. So at this time the build is triggered automatically. Now this time the manager don't have any issues. He don't have any headache to call the John again. Okay. Now John is free and he go back to the desk. Now and go back to the home and he take the rest. At the 9 p.m. IST time, once the build is triggered and is completed, one mail is triggered. And this build is successful or the failed mail will goes to the manager. And he check the reports, the build got successful or not. So the mail will trigger to automatically to managers or the stakeholders. So this called the manual versus schedule trigger. So what we learn in this video, we learn that when a people is not available, then this build should trigger. So when we are going with the schedule trigger, you can set up the time and the build will trigger automatically on the given time. And there are other build trigger types that we can also see, and based on that ones, the build will trigger automatically. So this is the difference between the manual versus the schedule trigger.